the Genetic Bottleneck and the Toba supervolcano, modern humans exhibit an astonishingly low level of genetic diversity. This evolutionary puzzle led anthropologist Stanley H. Ambrose in 1998 to propose a radical theory of global catastrophe. Ambrose linked our homogeneous DNA to the largest explosive eruption of the Quaternary period, the Toba supervolcano on Sumatra, which erupted approximately 74,000 years ago. Rated at VEI 8, the eruption injected vast amounts of sulfur into the stratosphere, triggering a prolonged volcanic winter. This ecological crisis, Ambrose argued, decimated the global Homo sapiens population, leaving only a critical threshold of 3,000 to 10,000 survivors. Humanity survived only because these desperate groups transitioned from isolated primate-like troops to cooperative, resource-sharing social networks, the birth of tribes. The Miyake event and the invisible cosmic strike. Locked inside the rings of ancient trees lies the silent record of a cosmic storm that would completely paralyze modern civilization. In 2012, Japanese physicist Fusa Miyake analyzed cedar tree rings and discovered a massive 12% spike in radioactive carbon-14, 14C, dating back to 774 to 775 AD. This anomaly, now known as the Miyake event, was caused by an unprecedented burst of high-energy cosmic radiation 20 times more intense than any solar flare ever recorded in human history. In the 8th century, an agricultural world barely noticed the invisible strike. Today, a repeat of the Miyake event would instantly destroy orbiting satellites, fry power grid transformers, and trigger a catastrophic global blackout lasting months or even years. The catastrophic eruption of Mount Tambora. On the night of April 5, 1815, British soldiers stationed on Java heard distant thunderous booms that they mistook for naval artillery. Believing a nearby outpost was under attack, the governor, Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles, immediately dispatched troops and rescue boats. It took days for falling volcanic ash to reveal the truth. They were witnessing the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded history, the explosion of Mount Tambora, VEI 7. Centuries of dormancy had built up a pressure of 4,000 to 5,000 bars in the magma chamber. Tambora ejected 150 cubic kilometers of material and unleashed a 4-meter tsunami. While 10,000 people died instantly, the total toll reached 90,000 due to ash-contaminated water, epidemics, and widespread famine. The stratospheric sulfur aerosols blocked global sunlight, turning 1816 into the infamous Year Without a Summer. The Carrington event and the birth of space weather. In the late summer of 1859, gold miners in the Colorado Rockies awoke to an aurora so brilliant they mistook it for daylight and began cooking breakfast. The day before, on September 1st, British astronomer Richard Carrington became the first person to observe a solar flare, sketching 2 blindingly bright beads of light above a massive cluster of sunspots. The coronal mass ejection, CME, reached Earth in a record 17.6 hours. The resulting geomagnetically induced currents paralyzed over 100,000 miles of telegraph lines. Telegraph poles threw sparks and operators received electric shocks. Boston operators disconnected their batteries entirely and sent messages using only the raw celestial current pulsing through the atmosphere. The Hong Kong plague and the race in a straw hut. In June 1894, a deadly bubonic plague epidemic brought the bustling colonial port of Hong Kong to its knees. British colonial administrator James Lawson provided a lavishly equipped laboratory to Kitasato Shibasaburo, a famous Japanese bacteriologist, while completely ignoring a young French physician, Alexandre Yersin, due to colonial rivalries. Undeterred, Yersin built a crude straw and bamboo hut next to the hospital and bribed local sailors to let him access the bodies of victims. While Kitasato searched for the pathogen in blood, Yersin extracted pus directly from the swollen lymph nodes, the buboes. On June 23, 1894, Yersin successfully isolated the gram-negative bacterium, later named Yersinia pestis. He went on to prove that the same bacillus killed rats, identifying the rodents as the primary transmission vector. The Tunguska event and Kulik's searching error. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, an object shining as bright as a second sun tore through the Siberian sky, exploding with the force of 10 to 30 megatons of TNT. Due to the region's extreme isolation, the first scientific expedition did not arrive until 1927, led by Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik. Obsessed with finding a massive iron meteorite, Kulik braved the swampy wilderness. Across 2,150 square kilometers, he found 80 million fallen trees, yet at the very center of the blast, trees stood completely upright, stripped of their bark and branches like charred telegraph poles. Kulik found no crater, mistakenly identifying thermokarst depressions in the melting permafrost as impact holes. Modern physics confirmed the culprit was a stony asteroid that disintegrated in the atmosphere at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers. The Spanish flu and the code in the permafrost. In November 1918, the Spanish flu decimated the remote Alaskan village of Brevig Mission, killing 72 of its 80 adult residents in a single week. The victims were buried in a mass grave dug into the permafrost. In 1951, Swedish pathologist Johan Hultin attempted to isolate the virus from the frozen tissue, but the technology of the era was too primitive. The breakthrough came 46 years later, in 1997, when Hultin read an article by molecular pathologist Jeffrey Taubenberger. At age 72, Hultin returned to Brevig Mission at his own expense, secured the tribal council's permission, and used his wife's garden shears to exhume the body of an obese woman named Lucy. Lucy's fat tissue had perfectly preserved her lungs, allowing scientists to completely sequence the genome of the H1N1 influenza virus. The Great Smog of London and coal chemistry. In December 1952, a dense, toxic, yellow-black fog rolled over London, killing thousands of residents over 5 days. While coal emissions and a temperature inversion were clearly to blame, the exact chemical mechanism converting sulfur dioxide, SO2, into highly concentrated sulfuric acid remained a mystery for over 60 years. In 2016, a team led by Renyi Zhang of Texas A&M University solved the puzzle. Zhang proved that the oxidation of SO2 into sulfuric acid was facilitated by nitrogen dioxide, NO2, another byproduct of coal combustion, and occurred directly inside natural fog droplets. The evaporation of these droplets left behind tiny, highly acidic aerosol particles. Zhang's research on modern Chinese smog revealed that high agricultural ammonia, NH3, emissions neutralize the acid, requiring fundamentally different regulatory strategies. The Bhopal disaster and the heroism of Operation Faith. On the night of December 2nd to 3rd, 1984, the worst industrial disaster in history struck Bhopal, India, when water leaked into a storage tank containing 42 tons of highly toxic and volatile methyl isocyanate, CH3NCO. While a deadly gas cloud spread over the city, another identical tank, E611, sat ticking like a chemical time bomb inside the crippled plant. There was an imminent risk that the remaining gas would polymerize, clog the safety valves, and trigger a second, even larger explosion. The Indian government dispatched Dr. S. Varadarajan with a team of top chemists to avert a second catastrophe. Under the high-stakes Operation Faith, Varadarajan bypassed bureaucratic hurdles, secured the release of arrested engineers to understand the piping, and decided to safely process the remaining 21 tons of gas into the pesticide, 7, successfully neutralizing the threat over 6 days. The Lake Nyos limnic eruption. On the morning of August 22, 1986, Cameroonian farmer Ephraim Che noticed that Lake Nyos had turned a dull red and the local waterfall had run dry. As he walked down to the village of Lower Nyos, a heavy silence hung in the air. There were no birds, no flies, and over 1,000 bodies lay dead on the roads and in their beds with no signs of external injury. The disaster killed over 1,700 people and thousands of livestock. Volcanologist Haraldur Sigurdsson and limnologist George Kling investigated the tragedy. Sigurdsson discovered that the deep water of the lake was heavily saturated with carbon dioxide, CO2, from magmatic degassing. A limnic eruption, a sudden overturn of the lake's stratified layers, had released 1 cubic kilometer of compressed CO2. The heavy gas formed a 100-meter deep cloud that cascaded down the valleys, suffocating everything in its path.